I'm Equal Opportunities Ombudsperson of the Republic of Lithuania. Basically, it's the office that investigates complaints on discrimination, harassment and sexual harassment, and discrimination covers various grounds such as gender, age, disability, sexual orientation, religion, and so on and so forth. Consider trans people to be one of the groups that we should work, and we consider it our also priority to analyze the situation, because Lithuania has not ensured the rights of trans people so far in all these years of independence. One of the main challenges doing the research to evaluate the situation of trans people in Lithuania was capturing different experiences of different trans people. We made a lot of efforts to ensure that we reach out to various ethnic backgrounds of trans people, different places of residence, that it's not only people from bigger cities, to ensure people that we talk to also of different socio-economic status, age, citizenship, community involvement. They're involved or not involved in different types of communities and different other factors. But of course, we might not have reached everything what we hoped for. We still had the challenges in reaching out to trans migrants, for example. We also spent a considerable amount of time to develop researcher participant relationships, so we even to develop a methodology on it, aiming so that we have some kind of horizontal approach, and that it's not an expert who comes to a trans person and interviews an expert, but that the trans person is an expert of their own situation. The goal was not to speak instead of trans people. The goal was to convey or to spread the messages of people that they shared during the research in Lithuania, and it was important then to use these further on to push for change. So a study itself might not completely change the views of the society, but it is it's a data that is based on proof, it's based on real lives that you can use to ground as an argument when pushing the government to take action. Not only the government, but talking on the EU level as well, to push for certain actions that are needed. It might also help sometimes to prove certain cases in courts when defending the rights of different people, giving the arguments what the situation of people is. Hopefully, at a certain time, there will be a government who will dare to adopt the legal changes, but also better safety ensured. Of course, the research doesn't transform people's brains or attitudes by that instance, but it helps to give an understanding, then sharing this information both with the prosecution's office, for example, or the police, or other institutions, schools, that they would at least have a grasp of imagination, what people face. Of course, a lot of trans people are talking for themselves and more going out talking in public, but sometimes people are tired of it. They have a burnout of continuing this education put on their shoulders. So I think it's our role and our duty be an ally in collecting the information, but I'm not saying that there are not dangers in spreading the information, because we realized certain media did not want to publish some types of information. We also had to consider whether to do it, because it might cause even more hate to people. And after the research, we also used it for advocacy meetings, meeting with vice ministers, or in some cases ministers of different ministries, because we provided recommendations to different ministries in the field of their activities, what they need to change or what changes need to be done. If you ask me if I'm hoping these changes soon be adopted, probably not. I'm not very optimistic that the changes would come soon. However, I'm still optimistic that there might be more changings through courts. In my opinion, If organizations, civil society organizations, together with the lawyers, if they made strategic cases with considering trans rights, the Constitutional Court should follow the same path and say that this is unconstitutional and totally undignified and totally a huge misunderstanding in a democracy, that people have to wait for 20 years for the law to be passed just to change their documents, to receive basic human right to health care. I hope that there would be more and more cases in courts and that it would change. We're not able probably to invent a wheel, and the methods, I guess, are very similar for various groups. So changing attitudes, negative attitudes and stereotypes, raising awareness starts very often with visibility, education and human stories. People say the law doesn't change the attitude, but it's not true. If we take the cases of the countries that, for example, adopted the laws of gender identity recognition or adopted the laws of same-sex marriage. So the views before that were much more negative, but after the laws were adopted, people understood, oh, okay, my life didn't change because it doesn't touch me. Nothing changes for me. It just ensures the right of my neighbors, my friends. So it basically affects your life, even if you are not part of the LGBTQI community, but for the better, because you live in a, I don't know, society that's more in harmony with itself. I also think it is a duty of the employers, and I don't only think, it's a duty by law of the employers to ensure equal opportunities. But of course, some employers do it formally, saying, oh, we do not discriminate anyone, but it's also important to take real action in educating also how to talk, how not to misgender people, how not to continue asking what is your dead name, how to, just be a supportive colleague in cases when people face, for example, harassment from other colleagues. We should not require trans people or LGBTQI people or other people who are discriminating also always to stand up for themselves and say when they face humiliation at the workplace or when they are told, oh, I will continue calling you by your man's name even if you're a woman and you want to be addressed as a woman. There should be then colleagues who bring this up and who react to it and who complain and who support the person and who also address this discriminative behavior and say, well, this is actually against our policy and our company policy, and bring these complaints up to the management instead of requiring always the people who are discriminated to take action and to defend themselves. So hormone replacement therapy is obviously not a luxury, it's essential healthcare. So from equal opportunities perspective, in my opinion, it should be part of essential healthcare and should be insured by the state and also paid by the state from the healthcare budget. While our office does not decide what entails or what does not entail, like compulsory medical insurance covers or not, but we strongly encourage the policymakers to make the changes that every person has a right to treatment and a right to healthcare, whether it entails a hormone replacement therapy or whether it's a voice therapy or whether it is any other part that is needed for the person to feel fully themselves and to feel better. It is a vicious circle. It is difficult to get out of. You cannot find a job because you cannot change your documents and you cannot receive the health care, but you can also not get health care and your documents change because you don't have a job. Yeah, it should not require so much to just live your ordinary life. It's still very humiliating because they need a diagnosis, so it's still considered a disorder which affects, you have a possibility to adopt children, and whether you can work in certain professions, whether you can go to army or not, and so on and so forth. And in my opinion, what should happen, and in the opinion of our office, what we advocate for, that the gender identity recognition should be based on self-understanding of a person or self-identity of a person. I think these issues should be separate. So self-recognition should be a human right to ensure, and healthcare is a separate issue. We all require healthcare in one or another way, and trans-affirming healthcare should be like a part of healthcare like for any other people, because why should it be related to diagnosis of a person? It can be related to self-identification. They can develop a certain registry or a way that people can access this healthcare. It's not like, you know, any person will come and say, oh, I want hormones to be prescribed to me. And if that happens, I guess there are protocols. We can continue creating and saying that we cannot do this or we cannot do that, but instead of thinking of what we cannot do, we could think what we can do. And changing this perception might help to find ways to ensure healthcare. Just follow the examples of the countries that already have it. So it's easy in this case. We don't have to invent the wheel. Unfortunately, yes, there is no procedure now in Lithuania. I'm not aware, or I don't know if there are any cases in courts by trans migrants who have asked to change the document. So in my opinion, with current political climate, I don't think the changes would come soon. Our office also has recommended the Ministry of Justice to change the registry in order that it would be applied also to migrant people without paying attention to your citizenship status. Currently, I think probably the sole way would be going to the courts and trying to achieve the change of the documents through courts, and even possibly a case in European Court of Human Rights after exhausting all national remedies. Probably if I didn't have any hope, I wouldn't continue working in the field anymore, but of course it might require substantial time and energy in order to advocate for change. So I believe it's not only court cases, but representation of people and advocacy activities and civil society organizations. But I also know that it's very difficult. Some people do it for 20 years and more, you know, to be able to achieve change. Firstly, trans migrants themselves going to different decision makers and telling their stories and the challenges that people face. As I said, we as an Ombudsperson's office were trying to collect some of the stories, but we did not reach out, or we could not find enough people. But yeah, we recommended also to adopt the changes, and we will continue doing that. But I guess cooperation between different civil society organizations, so trans migrants cooperating with, of course, trans NGOs that are here, but also LGBTQI. There could be a case in European Court of Justice, for example, that would oblige everyone to adopt certain changes, like it happened, I hope. I don't know, there is no case, but for example, like with the marriage of nationals and third country nationals, the member states who didn't have partnership or marriage of same-sex couples were forced to recognize a marriage if it was done between a national and a migrant. Maybe in light of this free movement of people, there could be some cases that could be adopted, that it could be recognized from one state to another. officially any person can come to the Office of Equal Opportunities, and before submitting a complaint, any person can consult with us, whether it would be on a phone or live or Zoom call or any other way. I wasn't born yesterday. I also understand that for certain people, if they want to, for example, complain about discrimination from an employer on whom they depend to have a work permit in Lithuania, that they would probably would not submit a complaint in this situation. But in cases like this, we can discuss about ways how to maybe issue a warning to a workplace, or not a warning, but to encourage them to adopt certain policies in the workplace. When we talk about the universities, the law basically ensures that people should not face retaliation because they submitted a complaint on non-discrimination, and that it should be ensured that the person does not face extra harassment or discrimination because they submitted a complaint. I would encourage to at least come to us and consult. Then if they feel safe enough still, then submit it. The consultations are completely anonymous. But when we talk about complaints, it depends on the situation. Of course, if it is, for example, a situation of harassment, it would be almost impossible to investigate it if it's anonymous. If a person, for example, complains about a certain order or the rule that is adopted in a workplace or in a university, that is applicable to more people. But if it's a certain individual decision that applies only to that person, of course it would be impossible to investigate it without knowing a name. I'm encouraging them to consult us and then think still of how to defend their rights, but also take into consideration that universities, educational places, employers have a duty to ensure the equal rights of the people. If it's not equal opportunities, Ombudsperson might be the court, which can even grant compensation if people face discrimination. We all follow with great worry what is happening around the world and also in the EU, with the rise of right-wing governments, but also very big opposition or finding scapegoats for any problems that exist, whether it's poverty, whether it's fear of war. Very often LGBTQ community becomes like a scapegoat that everyone addresses their anger towards. And of course, when it is fueled by certain groups, it causes distress to people that belong to the community. However, I still believe that European Union still has its core values, that it is defending in supporting of Ukraine, and we know that Ukraine is talking a lot about defending these core values of democracy, respect for human dignity, respect for equality, non-discrimination, and so on. So I still have this core belief that somehow with communities and with civil society trying to stay as strong as possible, we can still push forward. It is of course even more worrying when you live in countries, or I live in a country that has not fully ensured the rights of LGBTQI people. So in Lithuania we still do not have neither partnership nor marriage for same-sex couples. The laws on trans people are completely in a backlash, despite the fact that Lithuania had a case in European Court of Human Rights already back in 2007. So it's almost 20 years have passed when the court said you basically violated the rights of the trans person, and it continues doing so. Of course, there is a certain progress thanks to the trans community that fought from each individual person who contributed to fighting to making some kind of progress. That's how some progress was reached throughout the courts. However, legislation-wise, I'm not sure when these decisions would be made. And when we talk about the EU, Yeah, we have all these requirements of non-discrimination. There is a strategy on how to advance the equality of LGBTQI people, but there are no obligations for certain rules to be passed. And I hope one day that the European Court of Human Rights, which is not, of course, a part of the EU, but is Council of Europe mechanism, that it would oblige to pass certain legislations to all member states that are part of it. Depending on what issues, So, for example, Lithuania giving an argument that it's a rather Catholic country, and because of that there are a lot of people that do not agree to certain changes because it's against their beliefs. Then, as I always say, if your beliefs do not allow to do certain things, don't do them. But do not disturb other people from having the rights that are basically their human rights. In a democratic country, each country should take proportionate measures to ensure that the rights of all different groups are ensured. And when we consider the dignity of a person, the right to private life of LGBTQI people. So what is more important? A certain person's opinion that they think that the other person should not have these rights, or a person's dignity, that the person cannot continue living an everyday life, a dignified life. They cannot find work, they cannot go to school without fear of being bullied every day. So I think that is more important, because in certain cases we're talking about a life of human being, a threat to life because of the experiences people face. In my opinion, everyone becomes a part of any type of minority at a certain time, depending on time, space, where you are, at what age you are. So if you are young and capable and you do not have any physical disabilities, you're probably not in a disadvantaged group for a certain period of time. But once you grow, you will probably become part of the community that is discriminated because of their age, that doesn't want to be welcome in a certain events, or doesn't want to be welcome in certain job places, or throughout the life, because of our physical abilities deteriorating with age, we might also have a disability, or we never know what might happen. We might have a car crash. I hope not, but we might become disabled, or any person in any period of time might be in a situation that they are in a disadvantaged position. Once you leave the country and go to live in another country, you don't know the language, you become a part of the minority that is much more vulnerable in certain situations than people who live there for many years. It's not something that is put in stone. So I think with this realization, we should then all consider that it is important to ensure equal rights, because one day it might be the group that you think that should not get any rights ensured, but the other day it might be your turn. Somebody else will think that your rights should not be ensured then. But so when living in a democratic society, I know it might sound primitive, but it's also like a core guarantee for us to live our everyday lives, to be best versions of ourselves, or the best versions possible. We can just function without anyone interfering into our private life, but also respecting us as human beings. Happiness? Life itself, I guess. To live a life like that you choose as a human being, without violating the rights of others. Oh, what can I say to trans people? Wish you courage and patience, and to have at least one person around you who you can trust. And to non-trans people, if you want to be an ally, ask first. Do not decide for a trans person in your life. it's also a possibility for us to know that there's organization like this. Next time when we do anything similar, like a research, we would know where to look. Well, to me it was important to hear your stories, at least a little bit of them behind the cameras and in between the recording, to understand a little bit better what trans migrants are facing. And for others, I don't know, I hope it provides at least some useful information for everyday life, or where to address or where to come. So, as I said, if you're facing discrimination, do not hesitate to contact us on lygYbe.lt, that's lygybė.lt in Lithuanian. And you can find also information there in 4 languages. So if you need to submit a complaint or you need a consultation, please do not hesitate to come to us.
Thank you. It was great. Thank you so much.
Good luck.